My name is Kelsey Marco, and this is my best practice research plan. I'm going to focus my plan around decoding and encoding. Decoding is the ability to apply knowledge of letter-sound relationships to correctly pronounce written words, and encoding is the process of using letter-sound knowledge to write words. My second grade student, Brian, I'm using a pseudonym for his name, he needs to improve his fluency, and I'm going to do this by focusing on improving his phonics, decoding, and encoding skills. Right now, for differentiation, Brian is receiving 30 minutes of Title I reading instruction 3 days a week. He's also receiving a phonics lesson from me by reading and writing words with different sounds and patterns. He is in a small group setting, working in stations, and there's also flexible seating choices. The 3 interventions for Brian are going to be learning phonics through body movement, working on syllables, and working on root words and affixes. I first wanted to have a focus on the characteristics of primary learners, and this comes from EL education. I'd like to focus on the ones that are in bold and in light blue. They say young children find security in rhythm, ritual, and repetition. Young children understand the world first through their bodies. Young children seek patterns in the world around them, and young children express themselves in complex ways. I think that these characteristics are really going to encompass how I teach Brian those skills of phonics and decoding and encoding. One of the big ones being learning through his body. From EL education, I quote, "Children are born to move. They explore the world with their bodies, particularly their senses, before they process it with their minds. They learn best when their bodies are fully engaged." Like Brian and many of my students, they have a hard time keeping their attention and staying engaged. There's just not enough time for them during the day to be able to move, and they really need those brain breaks. And I think that teaching phonics through body movement would help them be more engaged and giving their body that break that it needs and being a little bit active. A study from Sandberg showed that in a first grade classroom, using movement and music, that students had increased their attention, and also it improved classroom atmosphere. Another study and research from Cox says that research has shown that physical activity stimulates the mind. By working some kind of movement into your classroom, you will find students will have less anxiety. By allowing children to get up and learn through movement, you're giving them a powerful tool to use in the classroom. I also viewed a video on YouTube called Gateway Learning Through Movement as something to check out. To improve Brian's phonological awareness and skills, I would use movement to keep Brian as well as other students engaged in their mind thinking, to learn the phonics and sound patterns in words to help them decode and encode. Here are just a couple examples of how I could teach phonics through body movement, one of them being called the quadrant hop, which I got from Jenny Elahi at the EL Education National Conference from Genesee Community Charter School. She gave an example of the word, for example, as they, and it's in a certain quadrant, and then the student has to jump to the quadrant on the floor as to where that word is. And you could use this with more complex words or even practice it with spelling. You can differentiate that in many ways. Another example is just creating a movement for each sound. So for example, in the word can, k could be hands on head, hands on hips, hands on knees, and then say can, and the hands could go to the floor and they could kick their legs up. Especially being in a small group, I think that they could keep themselves safe and moving in an appropriate way. Another characteristic of primary learners is that they need rhythm, ritual, and repetition. And I think with phonics and decoding and encoding words, they really need that routine and practice to become more skilled in their learning of that skill. The second practice or intervention would be teaching syllables. And the importance of teaching syllables from Reading Rockets is to divide words into parts to help the decoding process, knowing the rules for syllable division so that students could read words more accurately and fluently, and also understanding syllables can also help students learn to spell words correctly. I think one thing that is important in teaching syllables is that there are different types of syllable sounds, the open or closed, and that in every syllable there is a vowel sound. So really determining what that vowel sound is and what letter is creating that sound. Here are some examples of how I could use or teach syllables. One is through manipulation. So I could write each syllable separately and then have them in jumbled order. So as an example, with the word fantastic, tas, fan, tick, and then the students need to put them back in order to form the word fantastic. Another example would be the syllable scoop. Students could draw or use their finger to scoop with their finger under each syllable that they read, and then determine if that is an open or closed syllable type. Another practice or intervention I would give is teaching root words and affixes, which is morphological awareness. Morphemes are meaningful word parts that connect the spellings, pronunciations, and meanings of many words. They include prefixes, suffixes, and roots, or also called base words, from Zosky and Erickson. There was also a study by them as well from a kindergarten class that they received that morphological awareness approach and instruction, and through the activities and the instruction, they made gains in their reading and spelling. Here are a couple of examples of how I could go about teaching root words and affixes through word families. So if the word is heat, we can create heated, heater, heating, preheat. So using the root word as heat and then creating the prefixes and suffixes that could go along with it. Also categorizing words, so maybe focusing on words that end in ly, for example, slowly, lonely, hardly, neatly, so that they get the idea of that word family and sound. To assess Brian or any of my students on their phonics skills and their decoding and encoding, I would use the Reading A to Z assessments, looking at the phonological awareness assessment, the phonics assessment, then determining if they need any work with their high frequency words, if they're using those phonological and phonics skills to be able to spell and read those words. I could look at the high frequency words assessment. And again, this all encompasses the idea of him building his fluency. So assessing him on using the fluency timed reading on Reading A to Z to see how his fluency has improved. And also even just looking at the spelling quizzes each week for his encoding through our skills block lessons on spelling patterns. And in conclusion, as students learn phonics to decode and encode, students need movement, they need repetition and practice, and they also need that letter sound knowledge to be able to decode and encode to build their fluency. And here are my references. Thank you for listening to my presentation.